Right, we're going to get into a couple of pieces of American news that's gone on this week. And a second former aide has come forward this week with accusations of sexual harassment against the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo. Charlotte Bennett, a health policy advisor to Mr. Cuomo until November, told the New York Times that he had harassed her last year. Now, Mr. Cuomo was denied any inappropriate behaviour and ordered an independent inquiry into the allegations. And this follows another former aide, Lindsay Boylan, has previously accused the governor of sexually harassing her, and Mr. Cuomo, who has been governor for more than a decade, has found himself under pressure on several fronts in recent weeks. Now, later in the week, a third person came forward with more allegations. But at which point is he suspended and or arrested with the levels of allegations against him? And it's just like Sarkozy, it seems. These people can commit multiple crimes and get away with it until their faction decides they are no longer needed. That may be the case here. New York prosecutors investigating Donald Trump's business empire are questioning witnesses about two sons of his longtime finance chief, Alan Weisselberg. Now, investigators in Manhattan are looking at transactions involving Barry Weisselberg, who managed two ice rinks run by the Trump Organization, and his brother Jack Weisselberg, a director at a prominent Trump lender also. Now, Weisselberg Sr. has worked for the Trump family business since 1973 and is still the organization's chief financial officer, and was granted partial immunity 3 years ago for his testimony in the Michael Cohen case. Now, Weisselberg was registered as a Democrat for years and gave money to the New York Democrats, including Chuck Schumer and Mario Cuomo, before switching to the Republican Party ahead of the 2016 election. So he was a Democrat like Trump and Kushner again prior to the 2016 election. Weisselberg, born in and born to. Michael Cohen, born in and born to. I guess that is a pattern. Good news this week from Phoenix Police Department in partnership with other Arizona authorities, as on Friday they announced 37 arrests in connection to human trafficking and also sex crimes. And undercover police placed ads on websites commonly sought out by suspects seeking illegal sex acts with children as part of an investigation dubbed Operation Broken Hearts. Now, the probe targeted sexual predators engaged in child sex crimes and also human trafficking, and the suspects solicited and or brokered deals for various sex acts and were subsequently arrested. The operation lasted a week and took place in early February. And because the police were posing undercover, there were no live victims, thankfully, in this case. Now, the anti-trafficking advocacy group Polaris, which operates the hotline, says that more than 63,000 human trafficking cases have been reported over the past 14 years. And if you think that's high, think again. And the hotline has received more than 48,000 contacts, emails, phone calls, texts, and other forms of communication over the past year alone. Now, if only they would go into Congress and rout out the pedophiles there. Go Ogle under fire again. The U.S. District Judge in San Jose, California, said she was disturbed over Go Ogle's data collection practices after learning that the company still collects and uses data from users in its Chrome browser's so-called incognito mode, which is like private web viewing. That it's not private at all. And the judge has demanded an explanation about what exactly GoOgle does. And in a class action lawsuit that describes the company's private browsing claims as a ruse and seeks $5,000 in damages for each of the millions of people whose privacy has been compromised since June of 2016. And the US District Judge Lucy Coe said she finds it unusual that the company would make the extra effort to gather user data if it doesn't actually use the information for targeted advertising or to build user profiles. Now, Coe has a long history with the Alphabet Inc. subsidiary, previously forcing the Mountain View, California-based company to disclose its scanning of emails for the purposes of targeted advertising and profile building. But in this case, GoOgle is accused of relying on pieces of its code within websites that use its analytics and advertising services to scrape users' supposedly private browsing history and send copies of it to the GoOgle servers. And Amanda Bond, who is a lawyer representing users, said GoOgle makes it seem like private browsing mode gives users more control of their data. In reality, she said, GoOgle is saying there's basically very little you can do to prevent us from collecting your data, and that's what you should assume we're doing, she said. Now, Andrew Shapiro, a lawyer for GoOgle, argued the company's privacy policy expressly discloses its practices. The data collection at issue is disclosed, he said. Except people do not read the disclosures, and they know that. You know, one tiny line in a 1,000-line document is not exactly informing them, is it? The simple solution is there should be an option button at the top of the disclosure statement, collect data or not. That's the solution. But then perhaps they would do the sly mandatory move. If you refuse, you cannot use our product. A bit like the technology jab. It's not mandatory, but if you don't have it, you can't go anywhere. Now, another lawyer for GoOgle, Stephen Broom, said website owners who contract with the company to use its analytics or other services are well aware of the data collection described in the suit. But the judge isn't buying it, arguing that the company is effectively tricking users under the impression that their information is not being transmitted to the company. And she said, I want a declaration from GoOgle on what information they're collecting on users to the court's website and what that is used for. These techno giants, in my opinion, will have to be declared war on to regain this planet and some element of privacy for people. They're invading absolutely everything with TVs, monitors, cable boxes, phones, Fitbits, and their so-called smart technology. Except it's smart, it stings. And the reality is, these are high-level voyeurs. That's what they are. High-level voyeurs. You know, if some guy or girl is caught peering through someone's bedroom window, they get arrested. Yet these perverted voyeurs peer into every aspect of our lives completely unhindered, it seems. And that has to change. This is dictatorship governing of prying into people's lives. Who needs government and agencies spying on you when you have technology groups doing far more? But then these same technology groups are run by the rogue elements within the CIA and the NSA, by and large also as, quote, private contractors, unquote. Except they're not private. They're all connected to the central hub, like spiders. Next section is Israel. Now, the Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz has accused, wait for it, drum roll, Iran, well, I never, of likely being behind Friday's blast on an Israeli-owned transport ship in the Gulf of Oman, saying it's their initial assessment that the incident was an Iranian attack. And based on the Saturday statement, it would appear that the claim by Gantz wasn't backed by any actual intelligence, but was rather based on the geography of the incident and the current geopolitical situation in the Middle East. Iran is looking to hit Israeli infrastructure and Israeli citizens. Really? Now, the location of the ship in relative close proximity to Iran raises the notion, the assessment, that it is the Iranians. But I thought you said it was by Oman. Why didn't you blame Oman? Not part of the policy, you see. However, Gantz did acknowledge that the blast needed further investigation for the culprit to be established with certainty, saying that we are committed to continuing to check. You know, as per usual, just statements with zero proof. And it's all designed to sway public opinion. But here's a common sense idea, given how inflammatory and unproven statements like that can lead to an escalation of violence and more civilian deaths. How about you find out the truth first, before making blind public statements which costs people their lives? Time to raise your right arm, pointing to the sky, and your left arm has a moustache. But this next piece, Zikal. Israel's parliament passed a law Wednesday allowing the government to share the identities of people not vaccinated against the coronavirus with other authorities, raising privacy concerns for those opting out of inoculation. Now, the measure, which passed with 30 votes for and 13 against, gives local governments, the Director General of the Education Ministry and some in the Welfare Ministry, the right to receive the names, the addresses and phone numbers of unvaccinated citizens. And the object of the measure, which is valid for 3 months or until the COVID-19 pandemic is declared over, is to enable these bodies to encourage people to vaccinate by personally addressing them, according to a Parliament statement. Now, Israel, a country of 9 million people, has administered the 2 recommended jabs of Pfizer-BioNTech against the coronavirus to roughly 1/3 of its population already. 3 million. And this is in-your-face fascism yet again from this fake country. and yet no one seems to utter a single word against it. Never mind take action against these clowns of doom, death and destruction. And what they're doing here is implementing medical apartheid in that country, just as I warned of years ago. I stated they care not for their alleged own kind. I say alleged because it's based on a shared religion. But it's not a religion at all, it's law. But these sub-grade bastards have to be stopped. They are a blight on humanity, and yet, lo and behold, the trustee seems to think it's okay to send them our money. This is what they're doing to their own people. They've done it for thousands of years. And it's high time more called these people out, if indeed they are people at all, because that's highly debatable to me. And it's way past time, and we need to stop hiding behind the bullshit narrative of anti-Semitism, because that equals more deaths. And then we get this piece. Another organisation the trustee sent money to. Though the move will take some time to go into effect, the Pentagon's recent decision to relocate Israel to the area of responsibility of the US military Central Command, which operates in the Middle East, is a direct operational reflection of the Abraham Accords, in which Israel normalized relations with the United Arab Emirates and also Bahrain with Saudi support. No surprise there. Now, the head of CENTCOM, Marine General Kenneth McKenzie, recently told the Middle East Institute, "We do a lot of business with Israel now, just as a practical matter of fact, because their threats generally emanate from the East. In a certain way, this is just a natural recognition of that at the operational level." Says who, Mr. McKenzie? Says who? Which AIPAC string puller told you to say that, and why? CENTCOM can't even defend our own borders, never mind theatres of operation called the Middle East. And it's high time that they started protecting this country first. Now, there's a novel idea that nobody thinks of, as it contains far too much common sense. And as a reminder to Mr. McKenzie, these are the same people that you're not defending are the same people who pay your exorbitant salaries and kickbacks. Now, in comments reported by the Defence News, McKenzie said bringing Israel into CENTCOM will enable the US to place an operational perspective on the Abraham Accords, setting up further corridors and opportunities to open up between Israel and Arab countries in the region on a military to military level. This in turn, he said, will pave the way forward towards a collective, regional approach to common Middle Eastern threats. You all know who that is. Common Middle Eastern threats are created by a certain agency within our own border, Mr. McKenzie. So if you wish to eliminate threats, you will solve over 75% of world threats and crises by dealing with them alone. No, they're in on it, you see. Now, McKenzie stated that the move also lines up with a US vision, in which our friends in the region do more for themselves. That's a laugh. Israel do more for themselves whilst the American people pay for it. And in which neighbours work closely together. And that the CENTCOM move is a step in that direction. Only problem with that, Mr. Mackenzie, is they are not our friends or neighbours. Now, prior to the Pentagon's decision, a detailed report released by the pro-Israel Washington-based Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, which includes a number of former high-ranking American military officials as members, really, made the case for bringing Israel into CENTCOM's area of responsibility. But the great question for Americans is, who is running our military? Because based on that one statement alone, it's certainly not America. And what will happen next is Israel will move in and do what they've always done previously, gain access to the database, national secrets, and then sell it to China and other countries. And quite frankly, this is an erosion of our national sovereignty, and yet it appears that no one in government, military agencies, mainstream media or alt media is addressing it. In fact, most Americans just appear to ignore the giant elephant in the room. Now, according to the JINSA, Jewish Institute for National Security, and Director of Foreign Policy Jonathan Ruher, the idea initially received mixed responses from both defence establishments, but feedback has grown consistently more positive over the past 3 years. Well, I never. Yes, courtesy of Israeli puppets like Trump, Kushner and Pompeo is why. Now, Jinter argued that such a network could lead to the creation of a region-wide missile defence network with shared early warning alerts. And the cooperation could include steps to disrupt Iranian proliferation of advanced weapons to its proxies, which target Israel, United States forces and pragmatic Sunni states alike. In the face of these threats, CENTCOM can also initiate joint exercises and contingency plans for Iran-specific threats, thereby boosting cooperation, while Israel can find a new framework within which to share critical information from its war between the wars. Indeed, to disrupt Iranian force build-up in the region. And yet all the top people in Iran are all CIA assets. Hello, McFly. And they said moving Israel to CENTCOM formalizes regular military exercises among the US, Israel and Arab states, and such training would be crucial for developing effective theatre missile defences as well as boosting readiness and interoperability in cyber, counter-terrorism, special operations and maritime security, the report said. Now, Israel is no longer excluded by the Arab states in CENTCOM's region, but rather is becoming a central member of the regional anti-Iranian alliance. And the Israeli move to CENTCOM is a reflection of this historic shift, as they call it. And the Jinsa report states the move will ultimately facilitate collective regional action to roll back Iran's footprint in CENTCOM's AOR, while also preparing for a looming potential war and smoothing over day-to-day operational cooperation. Yep, as it's always been the case with that country, backed and supported by the CIA to prepare for looming wars. Because that makes the private contractors more money. That's how it works. People have no idea the levels of money paid for these operations. I spoke to a CIA assassin a long time back, and he was complaining he hadn't been paid by the CIA in years and was owed near $30 million. Near $30 million for a private contractor to kill people. And the term blood money is not lost here, it seems, because that's exactly what it is. 30 million would feed and clothe thousands of homeless within this country and multiple of African villages for over a year, for source sakes. And Israel has been under the European Command, AOR, since the latter's creation in 1952, an arrangement that proved beneficial to both sides for decades. Wrong. It is beneficial to the fake country only. They engage, infiltrate and take over, which is why so many of them are in the top positions in every country. And he said that arrangement enabled the US and other NATO ATON members to closely partner with Israel, particularly post 9/11, as well as to develop close missile defense cooperation, which saw EUCOM forces arrive in Israel for a Juniper Cobra missile defense drills every 2 years. How about some more common sense questions? We want to work closely with Israel, particularly post 9/11. But what if they were involved in 9/11? Has anyone took a look or checked whether they were? Or were they all silenced by the sub-grey race? Now, preparations reflecting such changes between EUCOM and CENTCOM could be found as far back as March 2018, when CENTCOM released a posture statement that for the first time listed Israel in its area as a partner for theatre security cooperation in light of rising threats from Iran and the Islamic State. Now, that same month, CENTCOM forces took part in the Juniper Cobra exercise held between the IDF and EUCOM. The IDF, oh dear. And General Joseph Votel became the first CENTCOM commander to officially visit Israel. And at CENTCOM, there is now an acute need to create a regional cooperation network that connects the US military, the IDF, and the Gulf states to one another to face common threats from Iran as well as ISIS. Meanwhile, EUCOM is keen to return its primary focus to great power competition with Russia. Russia and Iran. I wonder what the common connection is with that. Well, if you've listened to From Russia with Love, you'll know why. And another common sense question. Does anyone ask why we are in competition with Russia? Think about that. Can anyone in the military give a common sense answer to that question? And while you ponder on it, what about Russia is a bad guy because these same Jews took over that country in World War I and installed Jews into its power structure? Oops. An open question raised by the move, it is said in the document, is whether the US will now be encouraged to position precision munitions on Israeli soil, which could serve both the IDF and CENTCOM in the event of a potential conflict with Iran. And Ginza noted that the EUCOM has no interest in replenishing this stockpile as it wants its munitions in Europe in case of a conflict with Russia. And they're asking, will CENTCOM take a different view? And so there you have it. Israel is using America and its people and money to prepare for war with Iran. That just told you. Next section is children's news. And there was a complaint this past week in the UK, and it said there are disparities in whose knowledge and experience get it acknowledged. That's why professional titles matter. Oh God, not another thing that matters more than something else. Especially for those less likely to be perceived as experts. I'm fed up of people not introducing me by my titles in public forums. I'm a doctor, medic and PhD, and I'm also an associate professor. Ooh. Give her a Blue Peter badge. I worked hard to gain these titles, and I don't give permission for them to be omitted. Just because I'm an ethnic minority woman doesn't mean that I'm just Nisreen, tweeted Nisreen Alwan, a public health professor at the University of Southampton in the UK. What an ego-based woman that is. Yet again, labels, labels and labels. Why do we need them? Why are we tolerating this word salad, fake outrage, cancel culture, political correctness and engineered racism word salad, which are a blight upon our daily lives, leaving people frightened to speak, as someone somewhere will find an excuse to not only be offended, but outraged to boot. Why? Because the media told them so, just like children being told what to do by a senior figure. And the problem in society is everyone wants to be important, but too few want to do the important work. And that woman needs to shut up and get on doing her job. And given she's such a high-titled doctor, one has to ask the question is why hasn't she worked out yet that this virus and the masks are fake and not conducive to our health? Unbelievable. A message was sent out by Tank this week that now the new system is operational and everyone will receive $3,000 in their bank accounts. But then questions need to be asked. Most people don't have bank accounts, so how's that going to work? How far will $3,000 go? What happens after that? And is there some deal with the government in place to attain the $3,000? Maybe vaccines. And have we sold out? People are blinded by some money and never ask what happens next. Now, the update to that is there is no evidence to date this event took place, and that leaves Life Force, soon to become G-Force, following another split in the group, the fourth in 10 months, standing at 0 out of 35 predictions. I guess some people never learn. For months on end last year, the children's theatre production known as US Politics played delaying games with support for the people of America. Remember, Trump proposed a $2,000 stimulus check, and Pelosi and her Democrats denied it. But then the Democrats got into office and did this. The new House bill provides $1,400 in stimulus checks on top of the $600 payments issued through the stimulus bill passed in December. And I want John Hopkins people to listen very closely now, as we're going to do some basic maths, which we know you struggle with. $1,400 plus $600 is, and I will give you a few seconds to use your fingers and toes. Okay, the answer is $2,000, which is exactly the same figure Trump requested, was it not? What is the difference? One party wanted to play Santa Claus themselves, but only after the same Santa Claus had robbed you of all your life, jobs, savings, homes, and businesses. And America needs to wake up and smell the damn illusion being played out before our eyes. Use them. You have ears also. Use them. You have a brain also. Use it. Because if you cannot see the systematic ruination of this country by now, what use are your eyes, ears, and brain? There's a statement by a Baldwin, can't remember his first name, who said this: people who shut their eyes to reality simply invite their own destruction, and anyone who insists on remaining in a state of innocence long after that innocence is dead turns himself into a monster.